This afternoon over education, school choice, and whether tax dollars should go to private schools.
Supporters argue that many public schools are struggling with getting students to read and write proficiently, and parents should have options to move them to private schools. As Brian Mastery reports, opponents want voters to decide. And he joins us with more on the debate from the newsroom. Brian.
John, Aaron, if you think you've heard this debate before, you're right. This is one of the big battles last year in the Nebraska legislature, and LB 753 passed, where folks can give donations to private schools for scholarships and get the money back in the form of tax credits. But then voters will finally ultimately, though, decide, because they could reject that idea at the ballot box in November or support it. Remember, a petition drive gathered more than 100,000 signatures to do that. So today's bill, LB 1402, skips the tax credit part and instead would put $25 million directly into the budget to go to private school scholarships. Opponents of both bills argue that lawmakers should first let Nebraska voters decide. We'll now hear one of the speakers. This is from an opponent, Rita Bennett.
It was disheartening to me and disingenuous, it seems, that instead of waiting for voters to send a loud and clear message to you in November, LB 1402 has instead been crafted to create yet another way to divert public money for private use in an effort to do nothing more than an end run around the will of the voters with 753.
Supporters of both bills argued that parents need a choice, and this helps get young people in Nebraska better prepared to be adults. A number of supporters who spoke say they received scholarships in the past to go to private schools and are better for it. You'll now hear from one of them, Brandon Villanueva Sanchez.
My parents grew up in Mexico, where they were forced to drop out in 7th grade in order to help work and put food on the table for their families, depriving them of an education. So when my parents came to the United States and had me and my older siblings, and it was time to enroll us in schools, they told themselves that they were going to do whatever they could to give us the best quality education. And to them, that meant a private education.
Several lawmakers say they've thrown plenty of money at education in the state and the results aren't there, and this would one way to try something else. Opponents, though, argue the public dollars for private schools against the separation of church and state in the Constitution, and that private schools can reject students for a number of reasons when public schools must take everyone. The 3-hour debate is getting close to wrapping up now. It was a public hearing, so no matter how this shakes out, voters will vote on that other bill, the petition drive, this November. On your side in the newsroom, Brian Mastery, 6 News.